Hello. I'm going to start with a comment that was posted under my video about the Atlas Mountain murders of the two Scandinavian girls. And this is the comment. Many cultures are dysfunctional. The mantra of people are all the same and simply want the same things is a load of rubbish. Different cultures have different values. These values are often in conflict. This prompted me to put into words something I've been kicking around in my head for a while, and it's my theory about why Muslim societies are in general so messed up. Before we start, I want to point something out. I'm not saying that Western societies are absolute saints. I'm not talking about who has the greater propensity to murder or make war. Both Christian and Muslim societies have made war and have killed people they think of as enemies in their millions. But that isn't what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the society's ability to function within itself. For instance, Western societies, I should keep my hands out the camera, sorry about that. Western societies have managed to keep the buses and the water supply running even during times of war, while Muslim societies can't keep the buses running or a clean water supply even in times of peace. That's because Western societies have developed a form of social cohesion which assumes a certain trust between people doing designated tasks, while Muslim societies have very little trust between people unless they happen to be in the same clan or, even better, in the same family. I made a video called the Middle East Water Armageddon, in which I explain my theory about why Arab society developed with sort of a kill or be killed attitude, and how this saturated the religion the Arabs developed and which they then exported to those parts of the world upon which they imposed their culture. But in my opinion, there's another element to this. This is just my opinion, by the way, and I did only half of a psychology degree at undergraduate level. I went to university in the USA, and psychology was about half of my undergraduate credits. So I know something, but I'm no expert. Anyway, so for what it's worth, this is my theory. To illustrate it, I shall make up a person, a Yazidi girl living in a village in Syria. I'll call her Suhaila. And I'm going to slip backwards and forwards in time to illustrate what happened to a lot of Suhailas over the centuries. So we'll start with the Islamic State. It started in Syria and Iraq a few years ago and looked like it was going to take over the entire area. It spread very quickly and, more importantly, extremely violently, in a way that resembled the early spread of Islam under Muhammad and then under his warlord successors Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman. They used exactly the same techniques as were used by the Islamic State. They repressed and enslaved the conquered populations in exactly the same way. And they would have set up exactly the same society as had been established by the Muslims, or rather they were called at that time the believers, during their first 3 centuries of expansion and conquest, had they not been stopped by a combination of armies which, unlike during the 7th century, managed to get their act together. So, in the Islamic State, we see a reenactment of the beginnings of Islam. There's no doubt about that. Now, let's get back to Suhaila. Suhaila is 11 years old and her village is surrounded, invaded and then pillaged by a battalion of the Islamic State. She sees her father and most of the older men in her village shot or beheaded. Her older brother, similarly. Her younger brothers are taken away. They'll be turned into Islamic fighters or killed. Either way, she won't see them again. Her mother is separated from her, and if young enough is sold off. She herself is chained up and sold to a 50-year-old Afghani who rapes her every day. Now, assuming we're back in the 8th century, she won't be rescued. This is the story of the rest of her life. She will be beaten regularly to keep her in line, and she'll be one of several female slaves, all of whom are probably suffering from post-traumatic stress, some of whom might actually be mad from what they've seen, and all of whom will have to jockey with each other for the scraps that their limited existence has to offer. They'll be locked up together in a confined space, never let out, and with predictable effects of bullying and hysteria. Finally, this Yazidi girl conceives a child as a result of the rapes. If it's a girl, that girl will be sold off as a slave, possibly when she reaches the age of 5 or 6. There are 5-year-old slaves in Arab countries at this time of speaking. A boy will be removed from the women's house to live with the men and learn their trade at the age of 7, their trade being war. Now, here you have a girl suffering from trauma who saw her family murdered and was then locked up and raped, and knows that the children she is bearing will be taken from her within 5 or 6 years. What sort of mother is she going to be? Well, she's going to be a bloody awful mother, isn't she? Hysterical and illiterate. Her female children will be just as hysterical and illiterate as her, and will be raped probably even before they've reached puberty. Their children will be in the same situation, and so the society will take on the trauma of these slaves. The boys will know nothing from the age of 7 but the company of warriors, and many of them will also probably be sexually assaulted. What sort of fathers will they turn out to be? Well, they're going to be bloody awful fathers and terrible husbands. I'm not saying this happened in every case, but I'd say it was a majority. And if you look at how things turned out in the Islamic State, you'll see the case study. Okay, things improved. In early Islam, things improved and settled down and organised themselves. That original trauma, though, hasn't altogether left Muslim society, which tends to have much more institutional bullying and family violence than there is in the West. Domestic violence from the father is a particular problem in Muslim societies right across the board. It isn't much talked about within those societies, but it's catalogued in Israel because Israel has laws against that sort of thing, and it's got shelters and refuges. Whereas in most Muslim countries, the beatings go on behind closed doors and they're allowed to happen, and nothing ever comes back on the beaters, and deaths from domestic accidents go unreported and uninvestigated. But in Israel, there are some investigations. The police do investigate domestic deaths. So there are more figures about it in that part of the Middle East than in the rest. But bullying is an institution in Muslim societies. There's even a sort of hierarchy of it. And the system is that you bully anyone who you can get away with bullying. So husbands bully wives, children and servants. Wives bully children and servants. And children bully each other and servants. The husbands are in turn bullied by men higher up the totem pole than themselves. It's just taken for granted. This is how things work. The daughter of President Sadat, the president of Egypt, was beaten ferociously by her husband, and when she complained about it to her father, the president of Egypt, remember, He told her that she had to obey her husband better and left it at that. It didn't even occur to him to have a word with her husband. So, this is the basis of Muslim society. Of course, with a history like that and a set of assumptions about human relationships that are basically violent. And this means that trust between people is not that well established, and that's my take on what's wrong with Muslim society, as that chap said in his comment under my video. Different values. That's all it is. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe. And if you wish to donate, it's through PayPal at grannyopteryx@gmail.com. Till next time.